Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to Season 3, Week 12 of the DC Sports Digest. This has honestly been one of the more exciting and crazy weeks of DC Sports that I've covered so far. So without further ado, let's just get into it. Starting with the Nats, they made some more waiver claims because they can't sign any free agents. They claimed outfielder Joey Waymer and right-handed pitcher Paxton Schultz off waivers. They also avoided arbitration and agreed to contracts with Mackenzie Gore, C.J. Abrams, Jake Irvin, and Luis Garcia. Only one who was not able to do that was Cade Cavalli. So it's a little more transactions for the Nats. Obviously, they continue being cheap. Also, we're cheap with the contracts they agreed to with their players in order to avoid arbitration, which is kind of unfortunate. I just wish they would spend more money and actually want to legitimately compete. But there's still more time in the offseason, so we'll see what happens. That's all I have for the Nats. On the Wizards, not too much to report from their games. They did beat the Magic, but lost to the Timberwolves 76 and Pelicans, bringing them to 10-27 record. Alex Sarr at 23 and CJ McCollum at 27 in their lone win versus the Magic. But the big news this week was the Wizards made a blockbuster trade acquiring Trae Young from the Hawks in exchange for CJ McCollum and Corey Kispert. This is an amazing move, not having to give up any draft capital for a player like Trae Young. Obviously, he was on the outs in Atlanta, and they not really want him anymore. But yeah, this is just a great move. He's going to do so much for the development of our young guys. I'm sad for CJ McCollum and Corey Kispert, but obviously I wish them best of luck in Atlanta. But it's really, I made a little short about this also, but just amazing asset management by Will Dawkins, this was a chain of trades that eventually came from the Bradley Beal trade, eventually up to Trae Young, which is kind of crazy, just to manage assets like that. But obviously this year our pick is top 8 protected. So if it goes out of the top 8, we will not have our pick for this year. So we want to stay in the top 8. So I'm not sure how much he plays. He did not play against the Pelicans. He's still obviously hurt. But I think they're going to be very cautious with him in bringing him back. But obviously they do have to bring him back at some point. You can't just sit him the whole season. But yeah, I'm really excited. And honestly, next season, if we can get a top draft pick to be our number 1 guy, we have our point guard in Trae Young and all the other pieces around us. Like, we could legitimately compete, and I would at least expect us to be in the play-in, maybe even in the playoffs next season. But we got to talk about this season. We're not there next season, but this is just an amazing move. I'm so excited to see Trae Young on this team. He's already getting some chemistry with some of these guys. I saw his introductory presser. I was really impressed. He actually really wants to be here, which is kind of a surprise, but it's good. It's good to see him want to be here and want to elevate this team, and he kind of understands his role, I think, which is really great. He also has a connection with Will Dawkins. They're both had ties in Oklahoma. Obviously, Trae Young went there. I think Will Dawkins worked with the Thunder, so they have some connection. They know each other very well, and I'm sure Will Dawkins was monitoring that situation a lot, and obviously was able to get Trae Young. So yeah, I'm really excited for that. And stay tuned, and we'll see when he makes his debut. But this week we have games versus the Suns, Clippers, and Kings. He didn't give me a timeline for his debut, but he said hopefully soon, so maybe in the next week or two. We're going to see our first look at Trae Young actually on the court. That's all I have for the Wizards. A busy week for them. On to the Caps, they beat the Ducks and the Blackhawks, but lost to the Stars and the Blackhawks in the first game in a shootout, bringing them to 52 points. Justin sort of had a really insane game versus the Ducks. He had a hat trick and 5 points. Just a really crazy game, and really good to see progress from a young player. Michael also had 4 points in that game. We got a big win versus the Ducks. We were up 5-1. We almost blew the lead, but we hung on to win 7-4. I also wanted to shout out our prospects Antoine Keller and Eric Smataiko. They're both joining France and Latvia's Olympic team, so we'll have those 2 players. Tom Wilson and Logan Thompson are on Canada, and also Martin Ferivari is on Slovakia. So a lot of Caps to watch in the Olympics, assuming they get that ice rink ready in time. They also had a big win versus the Blackhawks. Not too much to report from there, but because the Blackhawks, they kind of were shorthanded that second game. They had an AHL goalie, so it was obviously one we should win, but we were able to take care of business and not blow that game, lead in that game. Yeah, that's really all there is for the Caps this week. They have games coming up versus the Predators, Canadiens, and Sharks. Hopefully they can continue their upward climb and continue to stay in a playoff spot in the Metro. That's all I have for the Caps. On to the Commanders, also a lot to talk about for them. They ended the season, feels like a long time ago, but it was only a week ago. They beat the Eagles 24-17, actually got a win, ended the season at 5-12. So overall, a really disappointing season. It seemed like even with the slow start, we had a 3-2 record. Then things just fell apart. A lot of injuries, a lot of stuff going on. But the season's finally over, and hopefully it should be only up from here. Quan Martin was benched, so he could be out the door. I think he hasn't been playing so great as of lately. I could see them moving on from him, which is kind of sad because we wouldn't have that. I think our only 2023 draft pick, if we don't have Quan Martin, would be Chris Rodriguez, which who knows how much time he has, because maybe you get another running back and with a similar play style as Chris Rodriguez. So it's just really another reminder of that terrible draft class. But want to congratulate Bobby Wagner for reaching 2,000 career tackles. He joined London Fletcher and Ray Lewis in the 2,000 career tackle club. Hopefully all of them will be Hall of Famers in the next couple of years. Also want to congratulate Von Miller for earning a $500K bonus with a late sack. He actually had 9 sacks this season pretty quietly. I think I don't know about bringing them back, Von Miller and Bobby Wagner, but if they can be brought back in a smaller role, I think it's more likely Von Miller can be back in a limited role. I think if you bring back Bobby Wagner, they're going to put him in a larger role. But if they can both come back in limited roles, I'm all for it. But they just cannot be the starters. They just need to be back in a limited role. But now back to our draft pick. We actually had some help from the Browns and the Giants, who both won against both the Cowboys and the Bengals. But we ended up winning our game. So we would have been the 5th pick if we lost to the Eagles, but we ended up beating them and we moved to the 7th pick. So not the best, but I guess it was nice to beat the Eagles and honestly give them a tougher matchup. Playing the Bears is a much worse matchup. Playing the 49ers is a much worse matchup than the Packers for the Eagles. So obviously rooting for an Eagles loss in the playoffs. But yeah, hopefully we can get our guy in the 7th pick. Hopefully I'll have mock drafts in the next, probably at the latest another month. But yeah, mock drafts will be coming in the near future. I was going to wait to talk about coaching and coordinator changes, but things are really happening fast in this league. So we actually made some changes. Both Cliff Kingsbury and Joe Witt Jr., as well as offensive line coach Bobby Johnson, are all gone. Obviously, Joe Witt is going to be on at the end of the season. Cliff Kingsbury is a little surprising, and honestly, even more surprising is the offensive line coach Bobby Johnson, who I think people were a little skeptical about coming in because he didn't do so well with the Giants, but he did a really good job here in Washington. Helped develop Josh Connolly. Obviously, our O-line looked really good, so I'm really not sure what happened with that. And then Cliff Kingsbury is a little surprising too, but I think they just had some disagreements in philosophy. Him and Adam Peters and Dan Quinn. I think it's him and Adam Peters. There's been some drama. I don't know, like a lot of news about some disagreements and some more dysfunction. Nothing like the last regime, but some disagreements and stuff. But I don't know how much of it's true, but I think it is something worth noting. But we actually were really quick, and I already hired our new offensive coordinator. We stayed in-house, hired our QB coach, David Blau. He actually was a player at one point, and then he was an assistant QB's coach, and then when Tavita Pritchard left, he became the new QB's coach. And honestly, this is probably the only person I would take in-house. It's a little risky because he hasn't called plays before, but I think a lot of people like him. He actually is a pretty popular candidate. He was potentially going to go to the Lions. The Lions are interested. I think there are a couple other teams interested. So I think they're trying to hopefully find their next Sean McVay or Mike McDaniel or Kyle Shanahan. That the Commanders, Redskins, whatever, they had that they had those talents in their coaching staffs, but they let them go. So this time they're keeping a potential young talent in David Blau. He's only like 30 years old, so he's super young. And maybe he'll be the next new talented offensive coordinator. And honestly, if he is, I think Dan Quinn will have to watch for his job, because if this guy is a hit, like he should be the coach in the next couple of years. Maybe not next year, but like 2 or 3 years. That's obviously what we're hoping for. If not, we're gonna have to find another guy. Yeah, I think this is a pretty solid hire, especially if you want to go in-house. Because honestly, a lot of people are talking about Mike McDaniel or something, but that would have just been unlikely to get. He has head coaching jobs. He has all this other stuff. So I'm pretty happy with this, and we'll see. Hopefully it will work out. I wouldn't say it's the best hire, but it's not the worst hire either. So we'll see what happens with that. We also did some interviews with some of the defensive coordinators. We did interviews with the defensive coordinator position. Raiders defensive coordinator Patrick Graham. Also Chiefs defensive line coach Joe Cullen. So we're still looking at guys. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised by next week if we have a new defensive coordinator, just because we need to figure this stuff out quickly. And also some of these guys we interviewed either for offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator could come back as a different coach, because some of these position coaches could be on their way out just because they're switching coordinators. So we're going to be starting fresh next year, and hopefully that will work out and not hinder our performance too much. And coming up, like I said, we have the off season, and I'll be looking at the coordinator and coaching changes. That's all I have for the Commanders. Not too much other DC sports news. DC United's preseason starts in February. I think also DC Power comes back in February. So stay tuned for some more other DC sports news in the next month or so. My weekly awards, I'm giving Game of the Week for the Caps beating the Blackhawks 5-1. Obviously, it was against like an AHL goalie, and the Blackhawks are very short-handed. But like I said, we took care of business. Didn't let them come back into that game. My player of the week is for sure Justin Sordiff. In addition to a hat trick, he had another goal and also had 5 points versus the Ducks. So a really solid week for him. And my team week is the Capitals. They didn't do very well, but they got 5 points this week and a 2-2 record. That's all I have for this video. So thanks for watching. A very busy week in DC sports. If you haven't seen my short about Trae Young, if you want to hear more about that, make sure to check it out. I'm gonna check out the Instagram. And yeah, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this very, like I said, very action-packed video. So like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.